I pressed my back against the courthouse bathroom wall, the notarized document trembling in my hands like a leaf in a storm. 23 years of believing I was the ungrateful granddaughter who got nothing while my sister inherited everything. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead as I read Grandma's real will for the third time, her careful handwriting blurring through my tears. Outside, I could hear my uncle's voice echoing down the marble hallway, still telling anyone who'd listened how fair the original arrangement had been. He had no idea that in 30 minutes, when I walked back into that courtroom, everything he'd built his comfortable life on was about to crumble. My name is Jessica, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed my grandmother didn't think I was worth a single family heirloom. The call came while I was scrubbing crayon marks off my kitchen wall, my phone wedged between my shoulder and ear, my 3-year-old son pulling at my jeans. "Jess? It's me." My sister's voice sounded different, smaller. "Hey, Lynn. What's, Uncle Robert's in the hospital." I stopped scrubbing. "What happened?" "Heart attack. They don't think he's going to make it." My stomach dropped. Not because Robert and I were close, we weren't, but because of what this meant. Uncle Robert was the executor of Grandma's estate, the keeper of family secrets, the man who'd distributed her belongings 5 years ago when she passed. The man who'd looked me in the eye at her funeral and said, "Your grandmother wanted Linda to have the shop. You understand, Jess? You there?" "Yeah." I wiped my hands on my jeans, leaving streaks of blue crayon. "I'll drive up tomorrow." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." After I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. 34 years old, wearing a shirt with mysterious stains, hair that hadn't seen a proper cut in months. This was who I'd become since David left, a woman who cleaned crayon off walls while her sister ran a profitable antique business inherited from our grandmother. The next morning, I dropped at my neighbor's and drove the 4 hours to Millfield, the small town where I'd grown up. Where Grandma's Victorian house still stood on Maple Street, now converted into Linda's treasures. Where Uncle Robert had lived his entire life in the shadow of being the younger brother who never quite measured up. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and defeat. I found Linda in the waiting room, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she'd been crying. "How is he?" "Stable, but..." She shrugged. "The doctors say it was massive. He keeps asking for you." That surprised me. Robert and I had barely spoken since the estate was settled. "For me?" "He's been talking about Grandma a lot." "About the will." Linda's voice dropped. "Jess, I think he feels guilty about something." A nurse appeared. "Family of Robert Chen? He's asking to see Jessica." My uncle looked smaller in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his face gray against the white pillows. "Jessie." His voice was barely a whisper. "Uncle Robert." I pulled the plastic chair closer to his bed. "I need to. There's something." His eyes darted to the bedside table. The drawer. I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope, thick and yellowed with age. My name was written on it in Grandma's careful script. "She gave this to me," Robert whispered. "Made me promise to wait. But I thought Linda needed it more. The shop, the house. You were so young, just married." I thought. My hands shook as I picked up the envelope. It was sealed, and I could feel something substantial inside, not just papers. "What is this?" "The real will." His breathing was labored. "The one she made 3 months before she died. The lawyer, he was my friend. We thought we were protecting you." The room tilted slightly. "Protecting me from what?" "Open it." Linda had followed me in and was standing frozen in the doorway. "What real will?" "Dad, what are you talking about?" Robert's eyes filled with tears. "The shop was supposed to be yours, Jessie. All of it. The house, the business, everything. She left Linda the jewelry and some money, but she wanted you to have the legacy." I stared at the envelope. 5 years of thinking my grandmother had judged me and found me wanting. 5 years of watching Linda post photos of her antique finds on social media while I struggled to pay rent. "Why?" The word came out as a croak. "Because you were the one who stayed with her when she was sick. You were the one who listened to her stories, who cared about the history. Linda only visited on holidays." Behind me, I heard Linda make a small sound, part gasp, part sob. Robert's machine started beeping faster. I'm sorry. God, Jessie, I'm so sorry. I thought I knew better than her. I thought. A nurse rushed in. I need everyone to step out, please. In the hallway, Linda grabbed my arm. Jess, you can't seriously believe this. He's medicated, confused. I pulled away from her, still clutching the envelope. Am I? That will was probated. It's legal. This is just. She gestured helplessly. This is just guilt talking. But I could see something else in her eyes now. Fear. I walked to the bathroom and locked the door. With shaking fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a notarized will, dated 3 months after the one that had been probated. Clipped to it was a letter in Grandma's handwriting and a small brass key I recognized. It opened the secret compartment in the antique secretary desk that now sat in Linda's living room. The letter was short. My dearest Jessica, if you're reading this, then Robert kept his promise to wait until you were older. I know this will be difficult, but there are things in this family that need to come to light. The key opens what you're looking for. Trust the evidence, not the stories. Your loving grandmother, Rose Chin. I read the will. Everything, the shop, the house, the entire estate, was left to me. Linda got the jewelry and a cash bequest, but nothing else. But there was something else that made my blood freeze. A codicil at the end, in Grandma's shaking handwriting. I have recently learned of financial discrepancies in the family business accounts during the years 1998 to 2003. I believe my son Robert and granddaughter Linda may have information relevant to these matters. Should any questions arise about this will's authenticity, the documentation is hidden in the secretary desk. Compartment B, Financial Discrepancies. The years when Grandma was starting to show signs of dementia, when Robert was helping manage her affairs, when Linda was working summers at the shop. A knock on the bathroom door made me jump. Jess? It was Linda. We need to talk. I folded the papers and put them back in the envelope. When I opened the door, Linda was standing there with her arms crossed, but her confident pose couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Show me, she said. Show you what? Whatever's in that envelope. I studied my sister's face. The sister I'd envied for 5 years. The sister who'd built her entire adult life on an inheritance that was never meant to be hers. I think, I said slowly, we need to take a drive to your house first. The look that crossed Linda's face told me everything I needed to know. She knew exactly what was in that secretary desk. And she knew her perfect life was about to fall apart. The drive to Linda's house took 12 minutes, but it felt like an hour. We rode in my beaten-up Honda, Linda clutching her purse like it contained the answers to everything. She kept opening her mouth to speak, then closing it again. I finally said, turning onto Oak Street, for 5 years I thought Grandma didn't love me. Linda stared out the passenger window. She did love you. But not enough to leave me anything. That's what Uncle Robert told me. That's what you told me. Jess, please, I cried for 3 days after the funeral. I pulled into her driveway, next to the BMW she bought last year. 3 days wondering what I'd done wrong. Wondering why I wasn't good enough. Linda's house was a beautiful colonial with perfectly maintained landscaping. The kind of house I'd dreamed of giving Tommy someday. Built on a lie. She unlocked the front door with shaking hands. The secretary desk sat in her living room, positioned perfectly to catch the morning light from the bay window. Grandma's pride and joy, a 1920s piece she'd inherited from her own mother. Linda. I held up the brass key. Before I open this, I need you to tell me what happened. She sank onto her cream-colored sofa, the one that had never known crayon stains or juice spills. I was 22. That's not an answer. I was working at the shop that summer. After college. She was getting confused sometimes. Forgetting things. Uncle Robert asked me to help with the books. I moved closer to the desk, running my fingers along its polished surface. And? There were discrepancies, small ones at first. Robert said it was probably just Grandma's confusion, but when we looked deeper, Linda's voice broke. Someone had been skimming from the cash sales. For years. My stomach clenched. Who? Linda wouldn't meet my eyes. Who, Linda? Mom. The word hit me like a physical blow. Our mother had died when I was 16, Linda 19. Cancer, quick and brutal. What are you talking about? She'd been taking money from the shop. Small amounts, but over time. It added up to almost $30,000. She was gambling, Jess. Online poker, casino trips she told Dad were book clubs. I stared at my sister. That's impossible. Robert had all the documentation. Bank records, computer logs. The money trail led straight back to her. Linda wiped her nose with her sleeve. Grandma never knew. She died thinking Mom was perfect. So what? You covered it up? Robert said we had to protect the family reputation. And Grandma's memory. He said if word got out, it would destroy everything she'd worked for. The shop's reputation, the family name in town. By changing the will. By making sure the inheritance went to someone who could handle it responsibly. Someone who wouldn't squander it. Linda's voice trailed off. Like our mother did. Like you thought I would. She looked up at me then, her eyes red and desperate. You were so young, Jess. Just married, no business experience. Robert said it made sense for me to take over the shop, build it up, and then eventually we'd figure out how to make things right. 5 years ago was eventually. I tried to tell you. After David left, when you were struggling. I sent you money, remember? I helped with Tommy's medical bills, guilt money, love money, sister money. You were trying to ease your conscience while living in my inheritance. The key felt warm in my palm. I knelt next to the desk and found the hidden panel Grandma had shown me when I was 12. It slid open easily. Inside was a manila folder thick with documents, and sitting on top of it, a letter addressed to me in Grandma's handwriting. This one was longer than the first. Jessica, Linda whispered. Please don't read that here. Let's take it somewhere private, talk about this like adults. But I was already unfolding the letter. The date at the top was just 2 weeks before Grandma died. Asterisk, my dearest Jessica, I found the evidence today. All of it. Your mother took money from this shop for 3 years, and Robert and Linda helped cover it up after she died. They think I don't know, but I've always been sharper than they give me credit for. I understand why they did it. Your mother was sick in ways that had nothing to do with the cancer, and they were trying to protect her memory. But protecting one person's reputation by destroying another's future is not love, it's cowardice. I'm leaving you this shop not because Linda isn't capable, but because you're the only one who loved it for what it really was. Linda sees inventory and profit margins. You see stories and connections to the past. You understand that some things are worth more than money. There's something else you need to know, sweetheart. Linda didn't just help cover up your mother's theft, she's been doing the same thing herself. Not as much, and not as often, but the pattern is there. I have the bank records in this folder. I'm not telling you this to hurt your sister, but to prepare you. When the truth comes out, and it will, Linda is going to need help. Real help, not the kind that involves hiding problems until they get worse. The shop is yours. Do with it what feels right. All my love, Grandma Rose. PS. Check account number 4789 at First National. The password is storyteller. Asterisk, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the letter. Behind me, I heard Linda making small, broken sounds. She knew, I said without turning around. Jess, I can explain, she knew about Mom. She knew about you. I stood up, still holding the letter. She knew everything. It wasn't supposed to happen again. After Mom died, I swore I'd never. But the shop was struggling, and I had student loans, and just small amounts to get by until what? Till you inherited it illegally and didn't have to pay anything back? Linda buried her face in her hands. It wasn't illegal. The will was legal. Robert's friend made sure, fraud is fraud, Linda. No matter how you dress it up. I pulled out my phone and searched for First National's online banking. Account number 4789, password storyteller. It took 3 tries because my fingers were shaking, but finally the screen loaded. The account had $127,000 in it. What? I scrolled through the transaction history, monthly deposits, going back 15 years. All from the shop's account. All labeled emergency fund. I turned to Linda. She knew the whole time and she was setting aside money to cover what you and Mom stole. Linda's composure finally cracked completely. She sobbed into her hands, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face. I tried to stop. After I graduated, after I got the job in Albany. But the shop was my life, and when Grandma started getting sick, Robert said we needed to plan for the future, and I thought just a little more until we figured out how to pay her back. 15 years, Linda. 15 years of taking money from your own grandmother. I was going to pay it back. When the business was more stable. When I could afford, when? When you retired? When you died? When exactly were you planning to tell the truth? She looked up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. I don't know. God help me, Jess, I don't know. I walked to the bay window and stared out at her perfect yard. Her perfect life built on lies and stolen money. The worst part is, she still left you something. Jewelry worth at least $40,000. She still loved you. I know. But that wasn't enough. No. It wasn't enough. I turned back to face her. I need you to drive me back to the hospital. Why? Because Uncle Robert and I are going to have a very different conversation than the one we had this morning. Linda wiped her eyes. What are you going to do? I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope with the will. I'm going to get my inheritance back. All of it. And then what? I looked around her living room one more time. At the antiques that should have been mine, the success that should have been mine, the life that should have been mine. But mostly I looked at my sister, broken, guilty, terrified, but still my sister. Then we're going to figure out how to fix this mess. Together. Together? You're going to help me transition the business. You're going to come clean about the money you took. And you're going to get help for whatever's been driving you to steal from people who love you. Linda stared at me. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank account screen. Then I show this to the police and let them figure it out. She nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, what? I'll help. Whatever you need me to do. As we walked back to my car, I caught our reflection in her hall mirror. Two women who looked nothing alike anymore, one polished and broken, the other tired but finally standing up straight. The real fight, I knew, was just beginning. Uncle Robert's machines were still beeping when we got back to the hospital, but his eyes were clearer, more alert. Like he was waiting for us. Did you read it? He asked before I'd even sat down. Linda hung back by the door, but I pulled the chair close to his bed. All of it. And the account? That too. I set the envelope on his bedside table. $127,000. She was covering for you this whole time. Robert's face crumpled. I know. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you let me believe I was worthless for 5 years while you and Linda built lives on stolen money. It wasn't supposed to go on this long. But it did. I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was hammering. And now we need to talk about what happens next. Robert glanced at Linda, then back at me. What do you want? I want my inheritance. The real one. Today. Jess, it's not that simple, actually, it is. I pulled out my phone and showed him a name I'd found during the drive back. Margaret Santos. She's an estate attorney in Albany. I called her office. She can see us at 4 o'clock. Linda stepped forward. You called a lawyer? I called 3 lawyers. Margaret was the only one who could fit us in today. Robert struggled to sit up straighter. You can't just. The probate is closed. The assets have been distributed. There are legal processes for fraud? I'm pretty sure there are definitely legal processes for fraud. The word hung in the air like a threat. Robert's face went pale. Look, I continued, I don't want to destroy anyone. I don't want Linda to go to jail. I don't want you to lose your house. But I also don't want to spend another day living in a studio apartment while my inheritance funds someone else's life. What are you proposing? I'd had the entire drive back to think about this. Linda signs over the business to me. Today. She gets to keep the house. I'll buy it from the estate at fair market value using Grandma's emergency account. She keeps the jewelry Grandma actually left her. But the shop, the inventory, the business goodwill, that comes back to me. Linda sat down heavily in the other chair. And the money I took? We'll work out a payment plan, something reasonable. And if I say no? I looked at her steadily. Then I file criminal charges and let a judge work out the payment plan. Robert cleared his throat. There's something else you need to know. My stomach dropped. What now? The lawyer who helped us. Frank Morrison. He's been taking a cut. A cut of what? The business profits. Linda's been paying him 20% annually to keep quiet about the will switch. I stared at him. For 5 years? Linda nodded miserably. It started as a one-time fee for his help, but then he said it was ongoing insurance. To make sure no questions were ever asked. Blackmail. Essentially, yes. I did quick math in my head. 20% of Linda's annual profits for 5 years. How much? About 60,000 total. Jesus Christ. I stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot was full of people going about their normal lives, unaware that mine was exploding. Anyone else? Any other family members or lawyers or accountants I should know about? No, Robert said quietly. Just Frank. I turned back to them. Then Frank's about to have a very bad day. What do you mean? I mean we're going to see Margaret Santos at 4, and then we're going to pay Frank Morrison a visit. Night. Linda looked terrified. Jess, he's not a nice man. When I tried to stop the payments last year, he made threats. What kind of threats? About going to the IRS. About exposing everything in a way that would destroy the business and probably send me to prison. Let me get this straight. I was struggling to keep my voice level. You've been paying protection money to a crooked lawyer who helped you steal my inheritance, and when you tried to stop, he threatened you. Yes. And you never thought to call the police? Linda laughed bitterly. And tell them what? That I was being blackmailed about a crime I actually committed? She had a point. I sat back down, thinking. Here's what we're going to do, I said finally. Robert, you're going to call Frank and tell him you had a heart attack and want to make sure all the estate paperwork is in order. You're going to set up a meeting for tomorrow. I'm not sure I should be involved. You're already involved. You've been involved for 15 years. I pulled out the real will again. This is notarized, Robert. Which means there's a notary somewhere who can verify Grandma's signature and mental state when she signed it. Which means your fake will can be overturned. Robert closed his eyes. What do you need me to do? Tell Frank you want to make sure everything's bulletproof because your nieces are asking questions. See what he says. See if he'll admit to anything. You want me to record him? I want you to get well enough to help me fix this mess. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Visiting hours end in 15 minutes. I stood up. Margaret Santos, 4 o'clock. Both of you. I can't leave the hospital, Robert protested. Then Linda's going to have to speak for you. I looked at my sister. Are you ready to do that? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, what happens to the shop while all this gets sorted out? You run it. Like you have been. Except now you're working for me instead of stealing from me. And Frank? Let me worry about Frank. We were almost to the elevator when Linda grabbed my arm. Jess, wait. I turned around. There's something else. About Frank. My heart sank. What? He's been asking about you. Recently, the past few months. Wanting to know where you live, what you do for work, whether you've ever asked questions about the inheritance. Why? I think he's worried you'll figure it out on your own. I think he's been planning something. Planning what? Linda's face was pale. I don't know. But last week he asked me if you had any close friends. If anyone would notice if something happened to you. The elevator doors opened with a cheerful ding. I stared at my sister, processing what she'd just told me. You think Frank Morrison is planning to hurt me? I think Frank Morrison is planning to make sure this secret never comes out. By any means necessary. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the parking garage. Then we better move fast. As the doors closed, I caught Linda's reflection in the metal. She looked terrified. But for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't. I had everything I needed to take my life back. The only question now was whether I could do it before Frank Morrison decided I was too dangerous to leave alive. The elevator descended, and I started planning my next move. Margaret Santos had the kind of office that made you feel like your problems might actually get solved. Floor-to-ceiling law books, a mahogany desk that had seen decades of family disputes, and a woman behind it who looked like she'd heard every sob story twice. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Margaret said, reviewing the documents I'd spread across her desk. Your grandmother wrote 2 wills. The second one, leaving you the primary inheritance, was hidden by your uncle and replaced with a fraudulent version that benefited your sister. That's right. And your sister has been embezzling from the business for 15 years. 14 and a half, Linda said quietly from the chair next to me. I started in my junior year of college. Margaret raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. And the attorney who helped facilitate this fraud has been blackmailing you ever since. Frank Morrison, I said. He's been taking 20% of the business profits annually. Morrison. Margaret made a note. I know Frank. He's been sanctioned twice by the state bar. Once for commingling client funds, once for failure to maintain proper records. Lovely, I muttered. The good news is that fraud doesn't have a statute of limitations in estate cases. The bad news is that overturning a probated will is complex, expensive, and time-consuming. My heart sank. How time-consuming? 6 months to 2 years, depending on how much Frank wants to fight it. Linda leaned forward. What if he doesn't want to fight? What if we can get him to cooperate? Margaret studied her carefully. What do you have in mind? I pulled out my phone and showed her Frank's number. My uncle called him an hour ago. Frank agreed to meet us at his office at 7 tonight to review the estate documentation. You're planning to confront him. I'm planning to give him a choice. Come clean and face professional sanctions, or keep lying and face criminal charges. That's dangerous, Margaret said. If he's been blackmailing your sister, he's already crossed ethical and legal lines. Cornering him could make him desperate. He's already desperate. Linda thinks he's been asking questions about me. Personal questions. Margaret frowned. What kind of questions? Linda spoke up. About where she lives, her routine, whether anyone would miss her if something happened. You think he's planning to hurt Jessica? I think he's planning to eliminate the threat to his comfortable arrangement, Linda said. And I think I might be next after her. Margaret was quiet for a long moment, then reached for her phone. I'm calling the police. Wait. I put my hand over hers. If we bring in the police now, Frank will lawyer up and this drags on for years. My son and I can't wait years for financial stability. And if he hurts you, your son loses his mother. She had a point. But I'd been powerless for 5 years. I wasn't going back to that. What if we go in wired? I asked. Absolutely not. Margaret, listen to me. Frank doesn't know that I know. As far as he's concerned, this is just Robert being paranoid after his heart attack. If I can get him to admit what he's done. It's too dangerous. Linda surprised me by speaking up. What if we don't go alone? Both Margaret and I looked at her. My ex-boyfriend, Craig. He's a private investigator. He could be there as backup. I thought you said Craig was an insurance adjuster, I said. He is. But he used to be a cop. And he owes me a favor. Margaret shook her head. This is starting to sound like a bad movie. My life has been a bad movie for 5 years, I said. At least now I'm writing the ending. An hour later, I was sitting in Craig's pickup truck outside Frank Morrison's office building, wearing a wire that made me feel like I was going to throw up. Craig had agreed to help after Linda explained the situation, but he'd made it clear he thought we were all insane. Remember, he said for the 3rd time, you're not trying to be a hero. You go in, you get him talking, and if anything feels wrong, you get out. Define wrong. If he reaches for anything that could be a weapon. If he starts talking about permanent solutions to temporary problems. If he asks you to go anywhere private. Got it. Linda was in the back seat, nervously checking her phone. What if he doesn't show up? He'll show up, I said. 20% of a successful business is too much money to walk away from. At exactly 7 o'clock, we saw Frank's black Mercedes pull into the parking lot. He was a thin man in an expensive suit, walking with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. That's him, Linda whispered. Craig adjusted something on the recording equipment. You're live. Remember, natural conversation. Let him do most of the talking. My legs felt shaky as I walked into the building. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who barely glanced up from his phone. Frank's office was on the 3rd floor, Morrison and Associates, though I'd never heard of any associates. Frank was waiting in his reception area when the elevator opened. Jessica Chin, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Linda's little sister. I was sorry to hear about Robert. Thank you for meeting us on such short notice. Family is important. He gestured toward his office. Please, come in. The office was smaller than Margaret's but trying harder to impress. Diplomas from mediocre law schools, photos with local politicians, a bookshelf that looked like it had been staged by a decorator. Linda tells me you have some questions about your grandmother's estate. I sat in the chair across from his desk, fighting to keep my voice steady. I've been wondering about the timeline. Grandma died so suddenly, and the will was probated so quickly. Rose was very organized. She'd updated her estate plan just a few months before her death. That's what I heard. But I found some of her papers recently, and I'm confused about the dates. Frank's expression didn't change, but his hand moved slightly toward his desk drawer. What kind of papers? Letters, notes. She mentioned making some changes to her will that I don't see reflected in the probated version. Old people often talk about changing their wills without following through. The legal requirements can be overwhelming. She was sharper than people gave her credit for. Perhaps. But the will we probated was properly witnessed and notarized. If there had been any irregularities, they would have been caught during the process. I leaned forward. Unless the people responsible for catching them were the same people who created them. Frank's hand was definitely moving toward the drawer now. I'm not sure what you're implying, Jessica. I'm implying that you helped my uncle and sister steal my inheritance, and that you've been blackmailing Linda ever since. For just a moment, Frank's mask slipped. I saw calculation in his eyes, weighing options. That's a very serious accusation, he said finally. It's a very serious crime. Do you have any proof of these alleged crimes? I pulled the real will out of my purse and set it on his desk. This is the will my grandmother actually wrote. Properly witnessed, properly notarized, properly dated 3 months after the one you probated. Frank stared at the document but didn't touch it. Where did you get this? From my uncle. Right before he told me about the money Linda's been paying you to keep quiet. I think this conversation is over. I don't think it is. I stayed in my chair. I think you're going to tell me exactly how you falsified probate documents. And I think you're going to explain why you've been asking questions about my personal life. Frank's hand finally reached the drawer. He opened it slowly, and I tensed, ready to run. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a thick file folder. Your grandmother, he said, was not the sweet old lady everyone thought she was. What's that supposed to mean? It means she knew exactly what your mother was doing. She knew about the gambling, the stolen money, all of it. And she didn't care. That's not true. Rose came to me 6 months before she died. She wanted to make sure that when she was gone, Linda would be taken care of. She was worried that you would find out about your mother's debts and blame Linda for covering them up. I stared at him. You're lying. She asked me to make sure Linda inherited the shop. She said you were too young, too idealistic. That you'd probably try to pay back every penny your mother stole, even if it bankrupted the family. Show me. Frank opened the file and pulled out a handwritten note. In Grandma's writing, it said, Linda has been protecting the family reputation. Make sure she's rewarded for that. She asked you to hide the real will? She asked me to make sure Linda was provided for. How I accomplished that was my professional judgment. I felt like the room was spinning. And the blackmail? Insurance. To make sure Linda didn't develop the same bad habits as her mother. By threatening her? By motivating her to stay honest. I stood up, my legs unsteady. You're still lying. Am I? Ask yourself this, Jessica. If your grandmother really wanted you to have the shop, why did she give the real will to Robert with instructions to wait? Why not just have it probated normally? I couldn't answer that. Because the question had been bothering me since I'd found the will. Frank leaned back in his chair, confident again. Face it. Your grandmother knew your family better than you did. She made the right choice. Then why did she leave me the emergency account? For the first time, Frank looked surprised. What emergency account? I smiled. The one with $127,000. The one she'd been funding for 15 years to cover the money you and Linda stole. Frank's confident expression cracked. That's impossible. Count number 4789 at First National. Password storyteller. She knew, Frank. She knew everything, and she documented all of it. Frank reached for his phone, but I was already standing. I've got everything I need, I said. Thanks for the confession. I walked toward the door, half expecting him to try to stop me. But when I turned back, he was just sitting there, staring at the file folder like it contained the death of his career. Which, I realized, it probably did. In the elevator, I pressed the button for the lobby and finally allowed myself to breathe. Craig's voice crackled through the earpiece, outstanding work. We got everything. But as the elevator descended, I couldn't shake Frank's words. Had Grandma really wanted Linda to have the shop? Was I fighting for an inheritance that was never meant to be mine? The doors opened to the lobby, and I stepped out into my uncertain future. 3 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of what was now legally my antique shop, watching Linda pack the last of her personal items into banker's boxes. The morning sun streamed through the front windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above displays I was finally learning to call mine. The Waterford Crystal Collection goes to Mrs. Henderson on Thursday, Linda said, not looking up from her packing. She's been asking about it for 2 years. And the Victorian writing desk has a buyer coming Saturday. Thank you. I meant it. Despite everything, Linda had been professional about the transition. More than professional, helpful. The summer inventory is already paid for. It'll be delivered next week. She closed the box and finally met my eyes. There's a ledger in the back office with all the regular customers' preferences. Mrs. Chen, the other Mrs. Chen, likes oriental pieces. Mr. Watanabe collects depression glass. Linda, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She picked up the box. I have 14 years of damage to make up for. Margaret Santos had been right about one thing. Frank Morrison hadn't wanted to fight. Once we'd played him the recording of his confession, he'd agreed to cooperate with the state bar investigation in exchange for avoiding criminal charges. He'd lost his license and had to pay restitution to Linda for the blackmail payments, but he wouldn't see jail time. Linda, for her part, had agreed to a payment plan for the money she'd stolen. Small monthly amounts that wouldn't cripple her but would take 15 years to complete. Poetic justice, Margaret had called it. But the real breakthrough had come a week ago, when we'd finally solved the mystery that had been eating at me since Frank planted the seed of doubt. We'd been cleaning out the back office when Linda found it, another letter from Grandma, this one hidden inside an old accounting ledger. Not addressed to anyone, just dated 2 weeks before her death. I am tired of protecting everyone but myself. I wrote the first will to protect Linda from her mistakes, but I cannot protect her from her future ones. I wrote the second will because Jessica deserves the truth, even if it's painful. I am giving Robert both documents because I trust him to make the right choice when the time comes. I hope he chooses honesty over kindness. I have been too kind for too long. She was testing him, Linda had said when we'd read it together. Testing whether Uncle Robert would do the right thing. And he'd failed. For 5 years, he'd failed. Now I watched my sister load the last box into her car. She'd found a job at an estate sales company in Albany, still working with antiques, but as an employee instead of an owner. It was, she'd admitted, a relief. Jess? She paused with her hand on the car door. I know this doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know, I never meant for it to go on so long. Every year I told myself I'd figure out how to make it right, and every year I just didn't. I know. Do you? Because I don't think I knew myself until all this happened. I think I was addicted to the lie as much as Mom was addicted to gambling. I walked over to her car. Are you getting help? Real help? Therapy twice a week. A financial advisor who specializes in debt recovery. And I'm going to meetings. Meetings? For people with spending problems. It turns out taking money you haven't earned is just another form of compulsive behavior. I hugged her then, quickly, before either of us could think too hard about it. We're going to be okay, I said. Are we? Eventually. After Linda drove away, I went back into the shop and stood behind the counter where Grandma used to work. The register was the same one she'd used for 30 years, an old-fashioned brass machine that actually required skill to operate. Tommy would start kindergarten in the fall. I'd enrolled him in the local school, the same one where I'd gone as a child. We were moving into the apartment above the shop next month, not fancy, but ours. Really ours. My phone rang. Craig's number. Hey, I answered. Just wanted to let you know, Frank's office officially closed yesterday. The state bar posted the disciplinary notice this morning. How bad? Disbarment. Plus, he has to pay a $50,000 fine to the Victim Compensation Fund. Good. There's something else. He's leaving town, selling his house, closing his practice. Word is he's moving to Florida to work for his brother's real estate company. I looked around my shop, at the Victorian furniture, the Depression glass, the stories waiting to be told to new families. Running away. Looks like it. You okay with that? I thought about it. Was I okay with Frank Morrison escaping to Florida instead of facing trial? Was I okay with Uncle Robert keeping his house while making minimum payments on his restitution? Was I okay with Linda starting fresh while I dealt with the complicated legacy of a family business built on lies? Yeah, I said. I'm okay with it. Because the truth was, I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted what I'd always wanted, a chance to build something honest for my son. After I hung up, I walked around the shop, really looking at it for the first time as its owner. In the back corner, I found something I'd missed during all the legal chaos, a small display case with a handwritten sign, items of special interest. Inside was a collection of pieces that didn't seem to belong together. A set of children's building blocks from the 1940s. A wedding ring cushion with no ring. A baby's christening gown that had yellowed with age. At the bottom of the case was a small placard in Grandma's handwriting. Every object tells a story. Some stories are sad. But sad stories still deserve to be told. I understood then what Grandma had really left me. Not just a business, but a purpose. A place where families could find pieces of their past, where broken stories could find new chapters. That afternoon, I changed the sign in the front window. Instead of Linda's Treasures, it now read Rose's Legacy, Antiques and Stories. The first customer came in an hour later, an elderly man looking for a music box like one his late wife had owned. I didn't have exactly what he wanted, but I listened to his story about their 60-year marriage and promised to keep an eye out. After he left, I called Tommy at the neighbor's house where he was spending the afternoon. Mommy, when are we moving to the new place? Next week, baby. Are you excited? Will I have my own room? You will. And you'll tell me stories about all the old things in the shop? I smiled, looking around at my inheritance, complicated, painful, but finally, honestly mine. Every single one, Tommy. Every single story. That evening, as I locked up the shop, I found one more surprise. Tucked under the register was an envelope with my name on it. Inside, a key I didn't recognize and a note from Grandma. Jessica, if you're reading this, you fought for what was yours. The key opens a safe deposit box at First National. Box 247. What's inside belongs to you now, not because of law or wills or family obligations, but because you earned it. I held the key up to the fading daylight streaming through the shop windows. Another mystery. Another piece of my grandmother's complicated legacy. But this time, I wasn't afraid of what I might find. I had learned the difference between what people gave you and what you took for yourself. I had learned that sometimes loving your family means refusing to let them destroy you. And I had learned that the best inheritance isn't money or property, it's the strength to build something true from the wreckage of other people's lies. Tomorrow, I would open that safe deposit box. Tonight, I would go home to my son and start planning our future in the space above my grandmother's shop. Our shop now. Finally, completely, honestly ours.